Well, hello, folks out there in YouTube land. Got a big show lined up for you. Let's get right on into it. All right, yeah, the SEC and the Big Ten, they are getting played right now by the Big 12 and the ACC. They have been on the outs, obviously, ever since the Big Ten and the SEC combined. And they pretty much said, look, you never want two bullies to combine. That's never good. And that's what's happened. You've got Scott Farkas and Grover Dill, and they've combined. And the Big 12 and the ACC, they're tired of being the hapless rabble of victims.
In our world, you were either a bully, a toady, or one of the nameless rabble of victims.
All right. Who's next?
So they have tried to separate them, which is really smart. And Tony Petitti, who thought he had the automatic qualifiers kind of all set up for the playoff for next year. Of course, we know we're going to 16 teams. That's pretty obvious. The question was, are we going to go with the 4-4-2-2-1 plus 3, which is 4 automatics for the Big Ten and the SEC, 2 automatics for the Big 12 and the ACC, then you got 1 group of 6 and 3 at large, one of which would probably be Notre Dame. So that's what Tony Petitti's been pushing for hard, and he thought that he had the SEC on board with Greg Sankey, and that's what I thought. And the thinking was, hey, the ACC and Big 12 will go along with it because they're getting 2 automatics into the playoff, which, look, there are going to be years when they won't get 2 in, and there's been plenty of years where they didn't get anybody in. Now, going to 16, that'll help, but they thought, man, they're going to love this. They're guaranteed 2 spots. They might even get 3. So surely they'll do this. And the Big Ten was loving this because it puts them on equal footing with the SEC. And this is the important part. They were going to get the SEC to move to a 9-game conference schedule. That was the big thing. And that's what Tony Petitti wanted. It would also let you have play-in weekends, which we've talked about. And that was Tony Petitti's idea. And I showed you this. This would be the play-in weekend, and the Big Ten would do the same thing. And because Tony Petitti is a TV executive, former that is, he knew this would be a huge payday for the Big Ten and SEC because you'd have 3 versus 6, 4 versus 5 doing play-in games to get into the playoff. So they could sell that. He could then set up a SEC versus Big Ten challenge throughout the year and playing those games, which would be another big bonus financially.
Give me the money. Give me the money.
And it would make the regular season set up to where you could have a bunch of tougher games because it wouldn't matter because you got the 4 automatics. So he could talk the SEC into that as well. So Tony Petitti had this set up beautifully. He was going to diminish the SEC, strengthen the Big Ten, get them on a level playing field exactly. And the Big 12 and the ACC would go along with it because, hey, we're getting 2 automatics, which honestly made a lot of sense on the front end. But a couple of things happened. The Big 12 and the ACC said, whoops, wait a minute, we're not on board with this, which they don't have to be, but it makes it so much easier if they're on board with whatever you're doing politically. That happened. So Yormark and Phillips said, no, we like this 5 plus 11. Which would be the 5 conference champions and then 11 at large bids. And the reason they like it is psychologically. The coaches in the Big 12 and the ACC said, hey, if we go with this 2 automatics with the 4-4-2-2-1, we're telling everybody in the world we're half as good as the SEC and the Big Ten. And they don't like that. You're admitting defeat before you even step foot on the field. And I get it. I understand that perfectly. So they're against it now. Even though it's probably better for them, they don't want to do it because it sets them up as little brother. And their coaches all said, we don't want to be that. We got just as much chance to get in that playoff as everybody else with the 5 plus 11. Let's do that. Well, what that also did, either on purpose or inadvertently, split the SEC and the Big Ten. So Tony Petitti just can't believe it. He's like, oh man, I had this all set up with the SEC. Everything was going to be great. I was going to diminish them down. And now we're on equal playing field. Everybody, oh, this is just perfect. And the Big 12 ACC and then the SEC coaches stepped in and totally ruined Tony's dreams of this 4-4-2-2-1. And this is a story on CBS Sports that talks about, said, why the SEC reversed course on automatic qualifying heavy college football playoff format, what it means for the Big Ten relationship. And it talks about the very thing I just told you about, how they went into the spring meetings. The Big Ten believed it had partnered to transform the college football playoff into something like the NFL or the 4-4-2-2-1. And it says here it helped that the Big Ten caught the SEC in a perfect storm during that February meeting after the conference experienced three schools, Alabama, Ole Miss, South Carolina. They had just missed the playoff. Now, they would not have in a 16 team, but because it was 12 teams, 3 teams got left out. So they kind of had the SEC in a bad mindset of crap. You know, because we don't trust this playoff committee, we need to have some sort of automatic situation for the SEC and the Big Ten. So Tony Petitti was like, man, I got him now. I can make this work. It was really kind of genius on his part. But old Yormark and Phillips kind of decided they needed to split these two up. And again, they didn't care for the 4-4-2-2-1 for the reasons we talked about. So this has been an incredibly interesting last couple of weeks that I didn't see coming. It was really a combination of the Big 12 and the ACC siding with the 5+11 and pushing the SEC that way, and also the SEC coaches saying, I don't want to do this either. I don't like this. And they pushed Sankey to the 5+11, and now you're here. Yeah, so the Big 12, the ACC, SEC is all in favor of the 5+11 right here. The Big 10 is out right now. The 4-4-2-2-1 that the Big 10 really wants and thought they had the SEC, now these two are totally against it. The Big 12, ACC are totally against it. SEC is like, I don't think I like this 4-4-2-2-1. So everything has changed. So now I do not believe you're going to get a Big 10 SEC showcase through the regular season moving forward, because they don't want to square off against the SEC with them only having 8 conference games versus the Big 10's 9. You will not get the play-in weekends, which would have been huge, but again, that without having automatic bids, you can't do that, because all you'd be doing is creaking your own teams out of your conference by giving them an extra loss. So this was really smart by the Big 12 and the ACC, because this is going to cause dissension and a lack of trust between Petitti and Sankey. They're probably going to wind up separating and being more like this, which is what the Big 12 and the ACC want. They do not want them together because, again, that's two bullies. And if they're like this, that's much better for the Big 12 and the ACC. So whether they did it on purpose, whether it just kind of happened this way, the combination of the Big 12 and the ACC and the SEC coaches has driven a wedge between the Big 10 and the SEC. And I think you're going to see that over the coming weeks. I'll bet you Tony and the Big 10's going to get steamed about this. And they're not going to be happy with Greg Sankey. So you're probably going to start seeing a lot of negativity coming from the Big 10 towards the SEC, not only because they feel like Sankey didn't back out of a deal. He wasn't in the deal. He was just open to it. Sankey's very political that way. He's not going to just agree to something till he's really hashed it all out. He's been doing this way too long.
It's a possible maybe.
Ooh, I love to dance a little sidestep. Now they see me, now they don't. I've come and gone.
But you're going to start hearing from the Big Ten, SEC won't play 9 games. They're weak, And what Sankey knows is if I just stay with the 8 conference games and we move to a 5+11, I'm going to get a bunch of teams in every year. Last year, he'd have got 6 in. If he'd have moved to the 9 game, we'd have probably gotten like 4 or 5. You're going to lose 1.5 teams each year if you go to 9 games with the SEC conference. They've already run the stats on it. So every 2 years, you lose 3 teams. So the coaches have already informed Greg Sankey of that, so he can't really move on that. So now you've got a division between the Big Ten and the SEC, which makes it much less likely that they'll develop a super conference, which is what everybody's concerned about, that those 2 conferences would combine into a super conference like the NFL, which would be the AFC and the NFC, and then they would go in and poach the top teams in the ACC. like Clemson, Florida State, North Carolina, all down the line. Same thing with the Big 12. Let's say they take the top 5 or 6 teams out of each one, combine them into the Big 10 SEC. Now you've got a super conference of 50 teams. And they become like the NFL and kind of separate. And the Big 12 ACC, they are diametrically opposed to that. As you can imagine, to take their crown jewels, which is they've already seen it with Oklahoma and Texas being taken to the SEC. I mean, they've already experienced it, and the ACC's in fear of that big time because Clemson and Florida State are already trying to get out. So this has been a very interesting chess move by Yormark and Phillips in driving this wedge and siding completely with the 5+11. And they smartly went combined together instead of going, oh, well, one conference went this way and one conference went the other. It's all moved over here to the 5+11. And Big Ten is, Tony's got to be ticked off. He's got to be mad. And this is going to be a problem. So now the Big Ten's going to be under the pressure of having to, are they going to do the 5+11? Are they going to go along with it? Are they going to fight it? Because they've got a lot of power. Big Ten is not toothless in this. They've got just as much strength as the SEC in deciding this. So it's going to be a very contentious, pissed off Tony Petitti dealing with Sankey moving forward.
And I will have my vengeance in this life or the next.
And they've got to make a decision on this 16 team coming up. Now, it doesn't have to be done tomorrow, and Greg Sankey speaks to that here.
When are decisions made or voted on for expansion for the college football playoffs?
That's a good question. By agreement, the outer boundary is November 30, December 1 of this year for the 26 playoff. Now, keep in mind, when we went to 12 teams, the board said that'll be the format for 2026. Let's start early if we can, which we obviously did, and I think did overall in a successful way. But what was introduced immediately is let's go through these 2 years and conduct an evaluation. So we're in that evaluation standpoint. A lot of talk about really 14 or 16. I think 12 is known as kind of a foundation point, but the conversation is about 14 or 16, and then how are teams selected or placed into whatever size bracket exists is the headline question.
Okay, but what model do you like?
Well, I've been one who said over time, I'd give no allocation. So this whole 5-7 thing that exists now, I just make it the 12 best teams. And I was clear on that. Now, when we get into rooms, we make political compromises, if you will, small p, not like Congress political compromises, but to achieve an outcome.
But who decides on the top 12 teams?
Selection committee. Yeah. But here's what I think. I think we've spent so much time expanding and working through our own little side arguments about teams and, oh, we can't do this. We need this. You got to protect this bowl game or that bowl game. We never went back to the essence of decision making, which is how are teams selected as everyone relocated over the last 4 or 5 years. Do the analyses that existed and worked for the 14 playoff in 2014 still have the same relevance? And we're behind that curve, in my opinion. That's why other ideas are introduced and considered. And we've looked at ideas, this allocation of, it's called automatic bids. That's such a harsh term. I think allocations is one where I like that word because we already allocated, and look at last year. We had 2 teams not in the top 4 that get to move up because of the political compromise. We have a team outside the 12 that moves in, and then the teams that are displaced look around and say, hey, wait a second, that doesn't make any sense any longer. That introduces the questions around, should that model continue, or should that allocation model expand where other teams are brought in?
All right, yeah, so you can see he's definitely moved to the 5+11. I don't think there's any question. The coaches in the SEC, they're not going to 9 games. I can just go ahead, and my sources are telling me they are not going to 9 games. You can forget it. So this was a very interesting move by the ACC and the Big 12. I've got to take my hat off to them. That was smart. You've got to split up the bullies, and they've done it. If I'm Petitti, I'm not in a good mood right now. So we'll watch and see how this plays out over the coming weeks and months. But this thing's not done. And the Big Ten is they're probably going to throw a fit. At some point, Petitti, I don't know, he's not a Greg Sankey type. He's more of a get along and go along type guy. But if I was him, I would be ticked off because I had a really good deal set up. Everything was going to be fair. And, especially for the Big Ten, they're tired of hearing about the SEC. They have upped their game and they're ready to be treated equally. And Sankey's like, nah, we're still the SEC. We're the big dog. And, you can kind of stay over here. You're more of a junior partner. And the Big Ten's not going to stand for that. So I think we may see a bit of a war moving forward. I wouldn't be shocked by this. I think that partnership has been severed. I can feel it. If it hasn't been, it's coming. So anyway, very interesting. I got to take my hat off to Yormark and Phillips. I can't believe it, but they're playing their cards pretty well. And anyway, if you like this content, you just hit that like button. Lets me know. Continue to cover all these big college sports stories. If you've not subscribed, boo, 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 that button right there will not cost you a dime, and I hope you get my videos. And right over here is the most recent video. YouTube thinks you'll enjoy. We'll see you next time on Sports Talk Jay.
Murdoch. I'm coming to get you.